Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the third panel of the ArcheoFOSS 2020 conference. I'm going to be chairing this morning's session. And our first contribution will be by Joseph Lewis from Cambridge on least cost paths, modeling pathways, and movement potential within a landscape. Okay, over to you, Joseph.
Thank you. So I'll share my screen and then hopefully people can see it. Sorry. Okay, you should be able to see it now.
Coming up, okay.
Can people see it?
We are fine. We can see
Brilliant.
the presentation.
That's brilliant. Yeah, so thanks for coming to my talk and for the for people arranging the conference. So I'll be discussing the R package least cost path, modeling pathways and movement potential within the landscape. So I thought it'd be good first just to introduce what least cost path analysis is to make sure everyone has the same understanding. And it's for the least costly path between two locations. And it's based on a cost surface that expresses the ease or difficulty of moving between cells within the raster. In archaeology, this is predominantly slope, but you can include other cost surfaces such as water and other barriers to movement. And it's used to reconstruct pathways and then also to identify factors that may have governed the location of pathways. So as you can see on the image here, you have your elevation, you create your cost surface, in this case, Tobler's eigenfunction, and then you can create your least cost path. So why another least cost path analysis software? So many of you may have used other software such as ArcGIS or GRASS, but when I was doing my master's dissertation, it was quite apparent that there were a few methodological issues with how least cost path is done. And these are a few of the issues I kind of came across, and I won't read through them, but these will be the ones that I'll be focusing on throughout this presentation, and hopefully show you how the R package least cost path I designed overcomes these issues and provides you an easier method to be able to do least cost path for archaeological purposes. So the R package least cost path is an open source R package to model pathways and movement potential within landscape. And as I mentioned, it aims to overcome the methodological issues on the previous slide. It implements recently developed methods, and it leverages the iterative nature of least cost path analysis. So if you've done any in the past, it can be quite iterative, as in you're testing different cost functions, you're testing different digital elevation models, you're testing different cost surfaces to incorporate within your analysis, and it can be quite back and forth. And I just want to highlight this quote. So it's from Gaffney and Stan, and it really kind of exemplified why I think creating software is important, and in general, the kind of FOSS movement and its success of the dissemination of GIS techniques can only be claimed when a majority of field and academic archaeologists have access to such techniques on a day-to-day basis. And this quote is from 1996. And really, it highlights that there is still a need for this. And hopefully this R package, as well as getting people talking more about FOSS, will improve the field for archaeologists and what techniques they have available to them. So the first issue I want to talk about is the modeling movement anisotropically. So as I mentioned, archaeological least cost path studies are normally based on slope. And this is traditionally measured as the maximum rate of change from one cell to its neighbor. And this is done in ArcGIS and a few other software as well. But moving across slope depends on the direction. So obviously it wouldn't be too outlandish to say that it's more difficult to move uphill than it is to move downhill. So least cost path incorporates this anisotropic property of slope by calculating slope in all directions. And as you can see in the image on your left, these are two least cost paths created, one moving north to south and then one moving south to north. And these take different routes. And that's because one of the routes may take a route where you're moving downhill, but then if you were to take the same route in the opposite direction, you would be moving uphill. So it's more than likely you would take a different route. So this is quite an important component to think about, particularly when you're not dealing with things such as roads, where they've been placed within the landscape for a particular purpose. Another is it with testing digital elevation models. So as I mentioned before about that iterative nature, so the digital elevation model can have quite an effect on the least cost path. And least cost path is designed to be extremely flexible and allow you to easily test multiple DEMs with very little work, I would say. And I just highlight the code here. So you have your create slope CS, and within this function argument, you specify the elevation data you want, and then you can then feed that through into your create LCP. And in the image here, I show that as you increase the resolution, it has quite an effect on the least cost path. And VVR package least cost path allows you to readily test various elevation data. Similarly with the cost functions. So cost functions convert the change in elevation to other metrics such as the speed of movement. So this is the kind of traditional Probabilistic hiking function, but then there's also energy expenditure. So it's about understanding how much cost is to either move across a slope or how much energy you use. But there's really been little work in testing various cost functions, which one is more appropriate to your study area and your research question, and about understanding which one best models real human movement. And again, I've tried to make it as flexible and easy to use as possible. So within your create slope CS function, you specify the cost function you want to use. So in this case, I've highlighted Tobler, but as you can see in the image, when it kind of iterates through, I've incorporated about 10 different cost functions, and they're very easy to incorporate within your analysis, and it allows the easy testing. So as you can see, as you use different cost functions, it can have quite an effect on the resulting least cost path. Another is the increasing number of neighbors. So the number of neighbors is often limited to 4 to 8 or 8 neighbors. And this is what's highlighted in the top two images. So you have your 4 on the left and then your 8 on the right. And this has quite an effect on the least cost path. And the next slide, I'll show you what effect it has. But in essence, as you increase the number of neighbors incorporated within your analysis, it means that the least cost path has more potential to take a route that has less cost. So for example, if you're working on a 4 to 8 neighbors, the movement of your least cost path is limited to only those 4 neighbors. Whereas by increasing potentially up to 48 neighbors, you allow the least cost path to choose a more accurate route. And again, this has been made quite readily and quite easy to change. And that's by just specifying a different number of neighbors. So I've incorporated 4, 8, 16, 32, and 48. And I'll just show you the effect. So as you increase from 4 neighbors up to potentially 48, you can see that the least cost path is more accurate, and it's because it's not limited to those cardinal directions. So as you can see, when you look at the number of neighbors 4, it's quite jagged, and that's not a property of the least cost path. That's a property of the number of neighbors only being limited to 4. So as you increase the number of neighbors, it does mean that the least cost distance, so how much it costs to go from one location to another, becomes more accurate and actually reflects it reflects more of a true least cost path rather than the least cost path that's dictated by the number of neighbors that you specify within the calculation. So these are a few of the new methods I've incorporated. So the first one is cost corridors, and this is to identify preferential movement between two locations. So how this works is that it takes the elevation model on the left. It creates an accumulated cost from one location. It creates an accumulated cost from the other location, and then it averages the two. And by doing that, you're able to identify if you were to walk either from one location to another or the other way around, where are you most likely to walk? And in the case here with the more yellow, that means that this is easier to walk. So you're more likely to walk, and it kind of makes sense, but you're more likely to walk through the center area here rather than walking all the way up to the top left and walking down. And this is quite easily done. So within this create cost corridor function, you specify your slope cost surface or whatever cost surface you want. You specify the origin and the destination, and then it creates your cost corridor. And another method I've incorporated is this from everywhere to everywhere. So this was introduced in White and Barber 2012, and it calculates a least cost path from every location to all other locations. And what that allows you to do is to identify if there's any preferential movement routes that least cost paths take, regardless of where you're traveling to and from. So for example, as you can see, certain least cost paths will take a similar route. And that means that this area could be potentially here, could be identified as a preferential movement within the landscape. But when you're moving through the landscape, you get funneled through that. So obviously I've shown you hopefully various benefits of why I think ArcPackage least cost path offers advantages over other software. But I thought it'd be good just to briefly recap on some of the issues. So least cost path can consume large amounts of memory. And this is because it holds everything in memory. And it's quite common whilst you're doing analysis using the least cost path to find that you don't have as much memory. And this is because, so I've shown on the left here, but as you convert your raster to a matrix that is actually used in the least cost path calculation, it's squared. So it can get quite large very quickly. And it has been optimized, but because of the scale and the amount of data, it does get quite big. And I've shown here on the right hand side. So the object size, so how large the object is within your RAM, increases as a function essentially of your neighbors. So as you increase your number of neighbors to potentially 48, it does mean that the object size is bigger. So one of the recommendations I do say is if you can potentially use 16 neighbors, because that's a good trade-off between accuracy and computational burden, it's best to test with potentially less neighbors. So for example, 16, 4 or 8, as well as increasing or decreasing the resolution of the DEM to make sure that, one, you can run the least cost path, and it shows you kind of what you want to see. And then it's a matter of getting the trade-off between how accurate or what resolution of your DEM can be incorporated within analysis that is still valid, versus how accurate you want your least cost path to be. And it does become a trade-off. Alternatively, if you have access to a supercomputer or something like that, then you shouldn't need to worry. But particularly if you're doing it locally, it is something to be aware of. So I thought it'd be good just to do a few in practice of where I've used it. So an early iteration of the ArcPackage least cost path was used in my master's when I was modeling Roman roads in Roman Britain. And I used this to compare multiple cost functions to be able to identify which best model was of Roman roads. So in the right-hand side, in the upper and bottom, the upper is in Scotland, and then the bottom's in southeast England. And I used multiple cost functions to be able to understand which one is more appropriate for the Roman roads, and whether one is more appropriate in Scotland, which is more mountainous, and which is whether one's more appropriate in the south, which is more flat. And I also assessed how the number of neighbouring cells on the least cost path affected the results. So in the image here, so the bottom left, the orange one, as you move left to right, I'm increasing the number of neighbors, and it means that the accumulated cost from our dock becomes more accurate. And you can see that because the bands become more round rather than angular. And I've just got a link in the bottom left. So if you'd like to read my dissertation, it's there. And I also have a presentation I did based on my master's dissertation. So if you'd like to read that, then feel free. Another bit of work I'm working on is probabilistic least cost paths. So this is about incorporating and propagating the error in digital elevation models on least cost path results. And it's about acknowledging that the DEM you use to calculate the least cost path underpins the stability and the accuracy of the least cost path. And by incorporating that error within DEM and how the error then affects the least cost path, you can create a probability of where the true least cost path is. So on the left-hand side, you see the workflow. So you take your digital elevation model, add some simulated vertical error, so that's error within the DEM, create your cost surface based on that. Then you create your least cost path and you iterate 1,000 times, let's say, and then you sum up how many least cost paths cross a certain raster cell, and then you're able to identify the probability of the least cost path being actually there. So in the image on the right, you can see that there's a certain band where majority of the least cost paths travel. So there's 12% or so of the 1,000 least cost paths I've calculated travel within the yellow region. And as you move further away from the yellow region, there's less probability of the least cost path being there. And in the bottom left, in the link there, that is to a preprint I'm currently working on. I'm hoping to submit it soon, but if you'd like to read it, then please feel free. So in conclusion, least cost path provides an open source, flexible, reproducible, and easy to use software for creating cost surfaces, least cost paths, and other recently developed methods. And I haven't shown you all of the methods. So if you're more interested, I have various links here. So I have a Twitter account, which I'm quite regularly posting on. And I normally use the hashtag least cost path. So if you're interested in following or kind of seeing what I'm up to, then feel free to send a follow. It's also available on GitHub, and this is where I'm putting my new developments that I'm doing. And then there's also the CRAN, which is the repository for our packages, and that's more stable in the sense of that doesn't have the most recently developed methods, but it is stable. And then my email address is there. So if you'd like to contact me on anything I've spoken about today or anything in general about least cost path, please feel free to send an email. And I really just wanted to leave with this quote again, because as I mentioned, it is at its core why I think software is important, and this conference in general. And I would like to say that it's extremely important that we do make what we do accessible to other researchers. And hopefully I've been able to potentially convince some people that the art package is something that you'd want to look into and hopefully use within your research. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. And are there any questions?
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Joseph. And I can see that there's one question. I think it relates to what you said about performance and the limits of model complexity. The size of the study area. Somebody wants to know what the size of your study area actually was.
That's a good question. So I'm not 100% sure. So this was a kind of a test bed, in the sense it's not a specific place I chose. It was more just to exemplify how the software is used. I can get back to you. I can't see who was actually asking the question because I'm on the full screen, but I can get back to you and give.
Paolo Ravati, yeah. You can discuss on the Telegram channel afterwards.
Yeah,
everybody's on Telegram, and I'm sure.
Brilliant. But yeah, so there is. I would say if you're thinking about using it for a quite large area, you will either have to reduce the number of neighbors or decrease the resolution. But that's because it takes a lot of memory. But it is about kind of testing back and forth and trying to get a good in between in accuracy and being able to run it.
Okay.
We can talk more later. Thank you.
Definitely. Okay. There's another question from Andrew. Have you attempted to compare the modeling with the reality on the ground, and how do they compare? You've done some ground truthing.
Yes. So a lot of the work I'm doing in here, for example, that was comparing against where the Roman roads were. So and this is partly what I'm doing my PhD on. So one of the nice things about Roman roads is that they are readily available compared to other roads. So in the case here, for example, when I was comparing multiple cost functions, I was comparing which one is closest to the actual route. And then in the example here, I gave this black line, so the thick black line. So that's a Roman road in Cumbria, so it's in North England. And I was in the paper, I was trying to understand whether the Roman road was built to minimize the amount of time taken. So yeah, I'm very much in the opinion that one of the best ways of using least cost path is if you have a route you can compare to, because then you're able to say, does it model the kind of real archaeology that we see on the ground?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Roman roads are an excellent topic for least cost path or path reconstruction, because we have at least partial evidence most of the time for most study areas. So does your tool set include some sort of a testing framework as well? Have you thought about a methodology
Sorry. So I don't have it in here, but I do. So there are two ways in which least cost paths are normally tested. So if I go here, so the two methods are predominantly where you take your least cost path, you add a buffer to it, so let's say 100 meters potentially, and then you calculate the percentage of the real Roman road in this case within that 100-meter buffer. So that's one method, and that's available. So if you go to GitHub, you'll see that there's a few examples where I've used it, so it's under validation. And then there's also another method called path deviation index, which isn't used that often. So it is something I would like people to use more. And it's incorporated within the package, and it calculates the area between the least cost path and the Roman road in this case, or the ground truth road, and it then divides by the length. So what you get is a metric that you can compare against different least cost paths that you create, and it gives you a very, very readily and stable comparison to be able to make. Because one of the issues with adding a buffer is that it is quite subjective. So you could one person could add a 100-meter buffer, one person could add 200 meters buffer, and the path deviation index aims to overcome that. But I can send some links in the chat after this, and feel free to reach out if you want to hear more.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Joseph, indeed. And now we have to move on to our next
Thank you very much.
Contribution. Thanks for being here. Very much appreciated. All right, and our next presenter will be Augusto Palombini, who is with the Italian National Research Council, and he's also going to talk about GIS-based research, the virtual countryman. All right, Augusto.
Okay, good morning. I start sharing the screen. So it should work now. Do you see?
A few seconds, probably. It always takes a few seconds. Okay, yes.
Yes, but it's not the right
The entire screen.
Okay.
That's the presentation, yes.
Now you see it? Okay.
Yes.
So, good morning. I'm Augusto Palombini from Italian National Research Council, Institute of Cultural Heritage Science. Well, you see in the title, in the English title, the expression tool for ancient cultivation recognition instead of identification as in the title, because I changed it in the sense that I'm not sure about the real the most appropriate word to use. Maybe it could be recognition or even simulation. I hope we will find the right dimension of this tool when we have seen it together. So I start normally in the virtual reconstruction area branch. The 3D modeling pipelines for architectural buildings are very well developed. We have methodology, a very strong methodology, and a huge discussion on that. Not the same for the landscape reconstruction, in the sense that in comparison to a significant literature on landscape archaeology, for the developing of the virtual reconstruction of landscape, we have not so much literature. It depends on the fact that, of course, it is easier to understand what can be the meaning of a reproduction in terms of a building, as a reproduction of a wood or a reproduction of a cultivated land is not so clear. But we can think that in ancient times, when we are going to reconstruct the historical landscape, we should have to put the right ecosystems in the position they were, or probably they were. So it is what I'm going to present is something midway between a tool for predictive archaeology and a tool for simulation of ancient ecosystems in order to reconstruct them in a virtual reality environment, where the tool was born. In fact, here we see some works of our lab from the reconstruction of a Paleolithic landscape of Casal de' Pazzi, close to Rome in the lower part, to a reconstruction of the Iron Age landscape of Tiber Valley north of Rome in the upper part. And it is just in this kind of work, the work of reconstruction of Iron Age landscape in Tiber Valley some 10 years ago, that we started to think a way for reconstructing ancient landscape, trying to get a procedural way, taking into account different aspects that can affect the choice of places where cultivated land. It was published presented in ArcheoFOSS 2012, and it was based on the assumption that some aspects affects these choices. So we built a sort of algorithm taking into account the distance from settlements, so the buffer of settlements, so a sort of site catchment analysis according to literature, the distance from roads and from water flows, and a sort of simplified eco-landscape map taking into account some aspects of the soils and geology and slope, and even the cost map. That is something that the previous presentation has well explained. This was the idea, taking into account also the chance to give different weights to some of these aspects, such as the distance from roads, from settlements, from river. And I will be on this topic in the following part. Before going on, I would like here just to have a minute to remember a person very important for this work that was discussing this idea with me 10 years ago, and who is no longer with us. And I want to remember her here, and hope in some way she's following us. It is Antoni Arnoldus Witzenveld. So after that work, we started to think and to discuss a lot on the best way to try to build a sort of complete pipeline for landscape reconstruction, starting from the GIS and going to the engine, to the environmental engine, and to the online transmission and browsing. And as when dealing with virtual reconstruction of past landscapes, we try to rely on some way realistic data. So we start from GIS and creating the ecosystems map that are then elaborated in other kind of software. Here you see the idea was to create a complete open source pipeline. The software, the main software that you see are almost all open source. Unreal is not exactly open source. It's taking on an interesting policy which is close to open, but not exactly. But I'm not going deeper on that in this situation. But the scripts that we created, that me and my colleagues were going to plan, and that are almost all ready some way, are completely open source. The fact that the Blender script is still in work is because we are considering the new capabilities of Unreal 5 that maybe could be maybe can make obsolete the idea of working in Blender at that level. So we are waiting a bit in this sense. But the idea is to complete the pipeline in order to have a complete pipeline to reconstruct ancient landscape by starting from a realistic simulation from the GIS, creating the ecosystems maps, using that maps for instancing on the land the trees, the plants, and the cultivated areas. So what I'm going to show you is the first part, the module created for grass for the GIS. That is a re-elaboration of the algorithm that we presented that I already shown you, with some refining it, with some corrections and some new elements. In particular, the sizes of buffer zones have been modified according to literature and discussions with ethnoarchaeologists. For instance, the buffer of water streams have been completely changed. We have added the mean annual solar radiance that can be calculated by a GIS software. We made an average annual solar radiance, and we changed some way the way of considering the slope values. I don't want to be too detailed on that, but the problems with in dealing with slope values are exactly the same that the speaker before me has showed. So this kind of calculation is strongly affected by the resolution of slope. So slope is a factor that can be managed with care. After these changes and these modifications, I developed a real module for Grass GIS that I call Air Countryman, the virtual countryman some way. It is composed by 3 tabs that we see. A basic tab with the input dem, that is used for calculation of slope and solar radiance, and the cultivation attitude map that is a simplified, in our case, is a simplified map of soils features from from the less adequate to the most suitable for cultivations, and the output map. And then in the second tab, it's possible to to put all the maps on known settlements, water streams, and roads, and even a cost map, giving to each of them a different value, a different weight in the final calculation. In the third tab, there are some more options. The assumption here is that the complexity of society may change the relevance of different parameters in deciding the land where cultivate the land chosen for cultivating, for farming. So the closeness to sites may be higher for simple societies, according to the literature, to the site catchment analysis and the work of Vita Finzi and the earliest work on the site catchment analysis, as the relevance of closeness to roads may indicate a more complex societies where the people may move quite easily along the roads, and there are big crew. And water is crucial. Water is crucial anywhere for cultivation. Talking with an ethnoarchaeologist I know, he told me about the situation of the North African area in prehistory, and told me that the absence until recent times of cultivation was due to the was mainly due to the absence of rivers and water streams. So it is a very crucial point, but the distance, the relevance to close to it may be weaker if the society is more complex and is able to build, for instance, irrigation systems. As the cost effect, the cost map, the map of the cost needed to reach given point in the map, in the area, is a complex point, and may be evaluated time by time, because it is a very complex element. So what this is again the case of in this case a test on the imperial period in the area in the Tiber Valley north of Rome, just to see how the tool works. And we see here the map, the DEM, the digital elevation model, with water streams and roads and sites, the simplified the soil map, and the simplified on the right you see the simplified soil map in just 4 categories, added to the information on location of sites, of water streams and roads. And what we see is what we see here are the results according to the different weight that can be given to the different factors. In comparison, I hope they are visible with the vector map of the centuriation of the Roman centuriation. So you see that maybe slightly different, but there is a difference. Well, it can be tested. Of course, there is so much work to do. The GRASP module is available, and you see here the URL, the location. It's probably we need to discuss parameters and algorithm with the community, and to make it better. And so we are open absolutely to the discussion. Documentation and tutorials are in progress, and so I thank you for your attention. If there are questions about it, I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much, Augusto. It's very heartwarming for me to see that GRASS GIS and predictive mapping essentially technologies are still
Yes.
such a hot topic. Still, I mean, it's a very contested topic in archaeology. So these methods have been heavily criticized, but the truth is
Yes.
that they have been also very, very successful, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I don't know if defining this tool a tool for predictive archaeology or a tool for simulating in a most reliable way the landscape to be modulated, to be modeled.
Yeah.
So, for instance, to see that the cultivated land are closer to sites doesn't mean anything in terms of cause-effect relationships. Sites could have been put in the places where they cultivate land, or land can be cultivated, can have been cultivated where the people have settled before. I'm not going into this kind of explanation. It's a tool for trying to find analogies.
Exactly, but it's a transparent tool. So there's a question coming here from Riccardo Montalbano. For the generation of slopes, or slope measure, did you use archaeological data, or did you work with modern elevation data?
Thank you for the question. That's we were thinking a lot before trying a methodology to reconstruct the ancient landscape. We tried to find the best, the most possible old sources to build the map. The starting map, and we found some aerial photographs of the 50s of the 20th century from aerial photos, and from that we developed the FBK. Fabio Remondino from FBK built a DM model, photogrammetric model. On that model, Antonio Arnoldus Witzenfeld, that I mentioned before, worked to modify, to really sculpting the dam according to their ideas, to her ideas, and to our consideration on the difference of, for instance, of the Tiber riverbed or other aspects in the ancient landscape. So it is a sort of mix between modern digital elevation model, but modified in order to fit to the most probable situation in Roman times.
Yeah, that's always an important aspect, of course, of these types of models. How much work do you put into reconstructing the paleo landscape, of course? Yeah, and that's it. I mean, it's not just the slopes; it's the substrates, it's the groundwater levels. You know, it's the rivers. It's a little bit a matter of scale as well, don't you think? I mean, if you work with 2-kilometer buffers anyway, how important is it to precisely reconstruct, for example, the rivers? You know, yeah.
In fact, resolution is a crucial point.
Yeah. All right. What I would really like to know is landscape reconstruction that has been done for many decades on the basis of point samples by paleobotanists. So an extrapolation approach. You have a pollen sample somewhere, and you extrapolate the landscape. So have you looked into other existing studies for your area, and have you compared these traditional approaches with the results for your model?
At the beginning, it has been done, and in fact, but it is not. It is not a topic affecting the drawing of the areas where there could be cultivated lands, but on the composition of the cultivated land. So in definition of different ecosystems, we used also the paleobotanic studies, so and also the literary sources. For instance, in Columella and Varro's writings, we know that the vineyards and the different fruits were cultivated often in the same place. The olive trees were together with other kind of cultivations, and so in the phase of virtual reconstruction, we used that information to characterize the land. But for the definition of the areas, we defined some macro ecosystems and worked on that.
Okay, all right. There's another question from Saverio. He asked if the objective of the project is it to reconstruct a certain landscape or to then draw models of behavior from it?
Both. Some way both. The problem is that this kind of tool has been is the development of a way used just for need, because we needed to reconstruct the landscape from virtual reconstruction, and we wanted to have something to rely on. And so it is the spread of the idea. Then it has been developed, and I hope it could be useful if tested in different places, in different areas, both on existing data, so to check if it is reliable and how to refine the parameters, and maybe to try to use it also for predictive purposes when it may be considered some way reliable.
Okay, we have actually a few more minutes. So because I have a background in predictive modeling for a very long time, I'm curious, there has been this, let's say, conflict going on between two different approaches, and they have been termed inductive and deductive approaches. Although I'm not sure if this distinction is really as accurate as it should be, but so the basic thing is your model seems to have a deductive approach. So you go and you ask experts, tell me what is your opinion, what sort of buffer distance should I use along these rivers? Now, my experiences and those of some colleagues have been that the more experts you ask, the more different opinions you get. They very seldomly converge on one opinion. So what about the alternative approach to use some verification or testing data and use data-driven decisions for things such as buffer distances?
Yes, I think it's just the inductive and deductive is has the same problem that they have in inquiries for the policy inquiries. So they have to use both according to the moment and switch from one to another. I think some way is too early to tell something about that about this tool. Generally speaking, I think that it's important. It's a work of maybe the main job of researchers is to try to find analogies, and so to draw some general rules to try to explore the new data that will come. So this is our attempt, but the variety of situations, their difference, and above all in archaeology, their difference that are often not known can make us dealing with different situations that even if some experts can tell us something maybe reliable, but their experience is still too many limited to their experience, to their sites, to their situations, and so so I don't have an answer to such a question, of course.
Yeah, it's difficult. Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed, Augusto.
Thank you.
And I think we need to move on to our next two presenters, one after the next, and we'll start with Emanuel Demetrescu on a 3D survey collection project. Hello, Emanuel, and the audience is yours.
Okay. Please come on with the presentation. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. I have to share my screen.
We are very well on time.
Yeah. Okay. I guess you can see the presentation.
Takes a few seconds normally, And now it's coming up. Okay, we see it.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm going to talk about me and Simone. I'm going to talk about the 3D Survey Collection. It is a software for the production of digital replicas with case study on what the Roman form of Nora. This collection of tools has been developed since 2016 during the research activities within the VH Lab in the Institute of Science for Cultural Heritage of the Italian National Research Council. We use these tools on the field for years and in laboratory to improve the survey tasks and the optimization of the 3D assets. So it's a running project with a lot of still unpublished tools that we will not find on the user interface of the 3D Survey Collection, since they are still in alpha stage, but they are there, and we are going to publish also them. But what is the 3D Survey Collection? Is an open source add-on for Blender that simplifies the task involved in the management and optimization of the archaeological 3D record. It can be used to transform an extensive survey, a reality-based digital replica of a landscape, of a building, or an object, of an archaeological excavation, of course, into a real-time oriented asset that can be used inside a game engine to create open world experiences. You can use it in Godot, in Unreal, in Unity, and so far and so on. So it allows to dramatically enhance the visual quality of photogrammetric survey. You will see with interactive tools you can paint from cameras and make some color correction tasks within Blender with your photogrammetric survey. It integrates different surveys made in different light conditions. A survey made in the morning, another one with a cloudy weather the day after, and so on and so forth. You can segment big models in tiles and create automatically level of details. You can manage the 3D scene complexity, and so that you are able to open all your big environment and model your virtual reconstruction hypothesis on top of the digital replica without crashing your computer, of course. You can manage georeferenced GPS and total station data points and important export models. It is published and available on GitHub, so you can use it for Git contribute this. It's a Telegram group, user group, where you can have some help. You will find it on the GitHub page. Following the list of tools in the user interface, a very first basic tool is the shifting feature that you can use to import unreferenced data, for instance, from a total station. Georeference it using reference points, for instance, from a dual GPS tool. Using regular UTF-8 text files, you import and export them. When you are done, you have performed, the row translation of a data set of points. You are able to export, to save back it on the disk to be used in your photogrammetry software. It is especially useful when you can perform your data station survey and you don't have absolute reference points on the ground. A useful feature in our pipeline is the possibility to import a bunch of 3D models inside Blender with correct orientation with using this multiple OBJ tool. Since in landscape Blender pipeline, a very popular add-on is Blender GIS. It is possible to copy, if any, the shifting points of the 3D models. The presence of a shift point to reduce the extension of the coordinates of the vertices of the 3D model from millions to hundreds is a mandatory step to manage a high resolution environment, because in some cases you can even have resolutions under 1 millimeter. And so it would be a very big data set to be managed within Blender or in other full 3D environments. big models at landscape level need the correct data management to unchain the possibilities of computer graphic. For that reason, it's a tool within 3D survey collection to segment the model, and another one to create level of detail. With the 3D survey collection segmentation tool, you are able to create tiles from a single mesh, and after that you can create level of detail. And it is very convenient for game engine for better interaction with big models with the load manager. And you have just to set your desired square meters of the tile. Better to stay under 100 square meters, and just press the cutter set. This way you will have a grid of tiles that you can modify, scale them, edit them, rotate the grid accordingly in order to have a optimized set of tiles. And now you have it in terminal. You have a very verbose add-on that says everything he's doing under the hood. And you can see, so you don't have to wait till that, but just look at the terminal, understanding that the software is working. And you have the timing of the work. So to cut this 3D model, it's a big model of almost 3,000 square meters. The cutting is performed in 30 seconds, so it's pretty fine. It's a good computer indeed, but it's pretty fine. We obtained 31 tiles in this example. And here, in this version of 3D survey collection, the task of creating the textures for our open world, for our level of detail landscape, we need to go back in a photogrammetric software, so we can export from Blender a bunch of tiles, import meshes inside a photogrammetric software, also with different scripting that we are not covering here. These scripts will be released as well, and the creation of textures per tile. We use magic formula, something like this. We are confident with these parameters, let's say that. So we are going to texturize 100 square meters with 6 textures with 4,096 pixels square. In that way, we are able to stay in the range to 1 to 2, 1 to 5 millimeter per pixel. That is pretty fine for us for a realistic visualization of our model, even in a VR context, in a full VR context with an Oculus and so on and so forth. And it's a very good master for also for other derived documentation like orthophotos or, for instance, pictures rendering for other purposes. All the stuff behind these numbers is in a not in press paper. This is the digital replica of 3D Victoria construction on the Metro C case study in Rome. Unfortunately, it's not still out. And we have also a 3D model inspector that helps us to understand if everything is fine. We get information regarding the surface of the model, the number of materials, and the resolution of the textures. For instance, here is the very first model made with the photogrammetric software. And here we have 8 millimeters per pixel. That is not pretty fine. It was a model made with a GoPro camera from a drone. So it was just the starting point for our work. After that, we have to create the level of details. We set the level of details. We reduce half the geometry and 10% the geometry in the second level of detail. And it is a verbose process as well. And this is the result, different level of details to enable the magic of the level of details in the game engine. So we are able to load and download the memory from the software. Is the export, it creates some clusters and create the FBX for and the GLTF it will be the next version of the 3D survey collection. Last but not least, the photogrammetric paint tools. You can import the cameras and the images, the original images, so that we are able to go inside the camera from the original photogrammetric survey and paint from it on to make it better when the texturing in the photogrammetric software didn't work pretty well. And it happens a lot of time, unfortunately. I give the floor to my colleague Simone. Yeah.
Hello, Simone.
Hello, good morning. Okay, wait just a second. Share the screen. Okay, you can see.
Not yet, but it's coming up now. Okay, we see your screen.
But this
Your entire
is
screen.
okay. And you can see? No.
Your entire desktop.
Wait. Share screen. Application. Share. I'm sharing.
Yeah. That looks better.
Okay, we have to wait. Okay, yeah. If I...
We can see the presentation window now.
Okay. We can see. Okay, so. Okay. In this second part of the presentation, I would like to describe how the 3D survey collection add-on was used to edit the photogrammetric data of the Roman Forum of Nora. So, a brief presentation of the case study. The archaeological site of Nora is located in Sardinia, on the south coast of the island, about 30 kilometers south of Cagliari. Nowadays, the most preserved evidences on the site deal with the Roman period, but other chronological phases are also testified from Archaic period till the Middle Ages. Since the 90s, many universities have been conducting field research in different areas of the site. And the University of Padova, where I'm developing my PhD project, is carrying out its research in multiple contexts of the site. And the Roman Forum is one of these. In 2008, the forum was enhanced with a valorization project, which aimed to clarify the general understanding of the whole complex by using gravel of distinct colors. My project aims of improving the understanding of the whole forum using a reality-based 3D reconstruction of the whole complex following the extended matrix methodology, and with the final intention of sharing online the whole result through a 3D web viewer. So we go to the add-on. Okay, to base the 3D reconstruction on a reality, a digital replica of the area was necessary. So a 3D survey of the forum was made. The 3D survey collection add-on was used to operate inside the Blender both the editing of the photogrammetric data and the setting of the virtual terrain for the virtual reconstruction. For the case study of the forum, some tools of the add-on were used. The importer, for example, allowed to import in Blender not only one of or multiple OBJs file at the same time, but also the coordinate, such as the ground control point of the 3D survey, paying attention in this case to the shift option. On the right side of the slide, you can see in orange all the control points. To manage a reasonable amount of data, the original photogrammetric data were decimated by using the internal decimate modifier of Blender. It's important to know that in this case, so in the decimation, but also in the cutting and in the texturing process, the parameter used were estimated starting from a comparison with the parameters used for the processing of the Metro C 3D survey previously quoted by Emmanuel. Okay, the multi-cutter was another tool used and was suitable to segment the photogrammetric mesh both for the texturing and for the optimization of the geometry. For this task, a grid composed of tiles with a dimension of 10 per 10 meters was calculated. The tile dimension was defined also in this case by taking as reference also the Metro C excavation result. In some cases, the tiles created near the external edges of the photogrammetric model presented a dimension of the mesh itself which was less than 100 square meters. The inspector tool was used to get information about the selected mesh, as for example the surface, the area, and some specs about the texture and the resolution itself. It's important to underline that these tools works also for a selection of meshes, as explained before by Emmanuel. The information, in this case, you can see the information about one tile. So you can see how many materials were used, how many textures were used, and also the mean resolution. The information about the area were employed to estimate the value of the textures, the final textures, which was performed in a second moment, obviously outside of Blender. The export tool was used, first of all, for the texturing phase, which wasn't performed in Blender. And in this case, 38 tiles were automatically exported as OBJ files in a selected directory using the multiple OBJs file exporter. At the end of this workflow, the exporter tool was also used for exporting files towards other softwares. The load generator. The load generator allowed to automatically create levels of details of the same mesh with the intent of not reducing the performance of the software during the visualization of the geometry. In this case, the software was Blender, but it could have been also Unreal, Unity, Godot, or a web app. The tool as explained by Emanuel, automatically generate a simplification of both geometry and texture. For load 1, a general reduction of the 50% was performed, both for the geometry and the texture. And for load 2, instead, the hardest reduction was done for the geometry. Load manager, in order to speed up the interaction with the 3D data inside the Blender, also during the reconstruction step, load manager consent to manage for each tile the visualization of the load. On the right side of the slide, it's possible to have a look of 4 tiles. And in this case, you have 3 different levels of details in comparison. Okay, so in conclusion, this add-on with all its operators becomes a useful tool for making a simple or an advanced data editing inside Blender, and also for managing 3D data not only from a 3D survey, but also data from a simple 3D modeling workflow. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Simone. And we have the first question from the audience already. I think this is about the part that Emanuel was talking about. And Parker Lewis is asking, what are the limits in terms of mesh complexity, number of triangles that you can handle in your engine?
Okay, it depends on how you are good to use the tool and how you are good to imagine the data architecture. What does it mean? If you don't need to segment all a very big mesh, you can create different meshes from different surveys and to put them one near the other one, creating even a city, even an ancient town. You don't have a limit regarding it. You can create you can eat your elephant in pieces, and so you don't have limits on this side. You for sure have limits if we think to the segmentation tool, for instance. The idea to cut a single mesh regarding, for instance, the forum, that is a big mesh, or the barracks of the example that is still in press regarding the line C of the underground room. In that case, we managed till a mesh that was, if I can remember well, is slightly more than 8 million triangles. So you can still cut with some effort, but you still can cut this kind of mesh. I haven't stressed the tool on this side, but there is the possibility to make a lot of improvements from a algorithmic point of view, because it depends how you cut the model. You can cut into pieces, and after you can make a quadratic approach, and that way I think that we can go at either number that 10 million. So I'm confident with it, but I have to test it.
Okay, thank you. So we have no other questions at the moment, but I'm sure there will be plenty of questions later on Telegram. So I would really encourage you to also get on the Telegram group.
Okay.
For the more technical questions. Thank you very much for presenting.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Impressive work. I understand that I really need to brush up on my Blender skills. It's obviously, I've done a basic tutorial on Blender. It's a very impressive piece of software, and I think in combination with your tools, we really have a great working environment here. So I'm looking forward to hear more about it. But for now, we'll go into the break. And we will be back online here at 11:40 for the next contribution by Irene Carpanese. Right. See you in a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a refreshing break. And our next presentation will be by Irene Carpanese from Padova University on her project ARCA. Irene, are you with us? Hello.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I share my screen. Do you see?
In a few seconds. Not yet. You don't see your screen yet. Okay, now it's coming up.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the conference organizers. I'm so excited to present my work in this place. I hope I'm up to it. I apologize, but I prefer to speak Italian, but the PowerPoint presentation is in English. I'm Irene Carpanese. I'm a research fellow at the University of Padua. Now I'm working on a 3D archaeological reconstruction and open data in a European project, but maybe we can talk about this project next year at ArcheoFOSS 2021. Today I present here my PhD project, ARCA, and now I switch to the Italian language. Arca Project è stato il mio lavoro di dottorato, svolto anche questo presso l'Università di Padova, sotto la supervisione per la parte archeologica umanistica della professoressa Maria Stella Bugiana e del professor Jacopo Bonetto, entrambi archeologi classici, e per la parte informatica dal professor Orio, che è un informatico, diciamo, prestato, tra virgolette, al Dipartimento dei Beni Culturali. Questo progetto si è concluso lo scorso anno, per questo devo essere sincera che ho avuto un momento di difficoltà iniziale per impostare questa presentazione, perché poi quando non si lavora sulle cose si fa in fretta a dimenticarsi. Però purtroppo o per fortuna ci sono stati altri lavori a seguito del dottorato e poi diciamo che lo scoppio della pandemia non ha permesso di presentare prima il lavoro, però questo trovo che sia una sede perfetta, ecco. Ho impostato la presentazione in maniera abbastanza teorica, per gli aspetti però più tecnici rimango a disposizione, per cui vi invito insomma a contattarmi via mail per qualsiasi cosa. Il nome ARCA è appunto un acronimo di archiviazione, ricerca e comunicazione del dato archeologico, ma si è voluto anche un po' giocare con la definizione col termine ARCA, insomma, che vedeva l'ARCA come imbarcazione atta a stivare e a preservare un carico che in questo caso, nel nostro caso, è rappresentato dai dati archeologici. Lo scopo del progetto era quello di sviluppare un prodotto, open source ovviamente, in grado di raccogliere in modo ordinato i dati archeologici, rendendoli disponibili per la consultazione libera sul web. Con dati, in questo caso, si intendono sia i cosiddetti dati grezzi, i raw data, quindi provenienti da scavi e da ricerche archeologiche, ma anche dati studiati e più strutturati. Nel primo caso, quindi, il prodotto ci andava un po' a configurare come un repository di lavoro da utilizzare durante uno scavo o durante dei lavori di ricerca. Mentre nel caso dei dati più elaborati, Arca, ci eravamo un po' visti Arca come un prodotto parallelo per una pubblicazione tradizionale, entro il quale inserire e consultare la documentazione che vuoi per motivi di visualizzazione, di costi, non poteva essere visualizzata in una pubblicazione cartacea. Ci pensi ai 3D, ad esempio, di scavo oppure dei modelli, o anche semplicemente a una serie di foto o di disegni numerosi riferiti a un saggio o a un'unità stratigrafica. Per fare questo, però, il prodotto doveva essere pensato come un prodotto altamente flessibile, non volendo rappresentare un unico scavo, ma voleva essere un prodotto che doveva essere riutilizzabile per diversi tipi di progetti contenenti anche diversi tipi di dati archeologici. Quando parlo di Arca, sottolineo sempre che non si tratta di un lavoro particolarmente innovativo, di un'idea particolarmente innovativa, ma voleva essere un tentativo attraverso il quale testare un modo diverso per gestire i dati archeologici. Infatti, nella mia esperienza, ma forse in quella di molti di voi, nel momento in cui andiamo ad informatizzare i dati, siamo abituati a interfacciarci con i classici e molto utilizzati in archeologia database relazionali, in cui quindi la documentazione viene inserita all'interno di schede legate tra loro da relazioni. Sottolineo che questa non vuole essere una presentazione contro i database relazionali, anzi sono strumenti che io stesso reputo molto semplici da utilizzare e sicuri. Però per esperienza personale ho sempre percepito che questi dati risultassero come ingabbiati all'interno del reticolo che viene rappresentato appunto dal paradigma entità-relazione del relazionale. Per questo motivo, dopo un'iniziale e corposa fase di studio, si è rivolti comunque verso i database definiti non relazionali, nello specifico individuando in MongoDB uno strumento ideale su cui puntare appunto questa scommessa. 2 parole su MongoDB: è una banca dati open source di tipo non relazionale che contribuisce a rendere il progetto Arca quindi un prodotto, come abbiamo detto, flessibile e adattabile per progetti differenti, sia per tipologia sia per presentazione di dati. Inoltre, in un sviluppo futuro e non nell'immediato, insomma, può anche predisporre e favorire la comunicazione tra dataset differenti, in quanto è impossibile inserire i dati di più progetti mettendoli in interconnessione tra loro. Questo appunto per la caratteristica di scalabilità orizzontale. Quando parlo di interconnessione non possiamo non parlare di load, quindi si è voluto predisporre una possibile e futura interoperabilità a livello nazionale europeo dei dati presenti nei database Arca, e quindi un ulteriore motivo che ci ha fatto propendere per l'utilizzo di MongoDB è stato proprio che questo database fosse strutturato in documenti JSON, i quali possono essere agevolmente trasformati in JSON LD, ossia il formato di serializzazione per RDF, che come tutti sappiamo è lo standard per la codifica, lo scambio e l'utilizzo dei metadati sul web. In questo modo, quindi, con un lavoro minimo può essere garantita l'interoperabilità dei dati che si vogliono inserire nei database Arca. Sempre per predisporre un possibile dialogo con i repository europei è stato eseguito anche l'allineamento terminologico delle voci, inserite quindi i codici univoci proposti dall'ICCD. Come vediamo infatti a sinistra c'è l'esempio di una scheda ICCD e il riutilizzo della terminologia dei codici all'interno del database di Arca. Dal punto di vista poi più tecnologico, la banca dati MongoDB fa parte dello stack MIN, che prende i nomi dai suoi componenti, ossia i framework di back-end, di front-end, Express e Angular, e dall'infrastruttura Node. Uno dei maggiori vantaggi nell'utilizzo del pacchetto, sappiamo che esistono molti stack, però uno dei maggiori vantaggi è appunto l'utilizzo dello stesso linguaggio di programmazione per tutti i documenti, per tutti i componenti dello stack, che risulta essere JavaScript. Ora, non è questa la sede per soffermarsi sul funzionamento di MIN, però insomma come ogni stack è un insieme di prodotti software finalizzati alla realizzazione semplificata di applicazioni e di siti web. Ovviamente anche la scelta dello stack non è stata casuale né semplice. è stata preceduta da uno studio delle possibili soluzioni e da un lavoro di ricerca incentrato soprattutto sui possibili fruitori, e questo attraverso un questionario diffuso all'interno di un gruppo di professionisti, e soprattutto sull'analisi dei dati che avremmo dovuto rappresentare. Ora, come sempre, ancora adesso che io lavoro sul fronte caldo dei dati archeologici, mi rendo conto che con questa tipologia di dati purtroppo ci si va sempre a scontrare. Noi sappiamo che il dataset archeologico è un insieme di dati, nella stragrande maggioranza di tipo eterogeneo e molto numeroso. In più al suo interno abbiamo dati di tipo testuale, documentazione grafica, fotografica, redatta in formati proprietari, aperti, poi denominata e trattata un po' arbitrariamente a seconda degli specialisti che ci hanno lavorato in quel momento. In più si aggiungono poi tutta una serie di nuovi dati, anche se nuovi non lo sono effettivamente più, che sono quelli legati ai modelli 3D, alle numeri di punti, eccetera. Diciamo che il database non relazionale, MongoDB, in parte può aiutare, abbiamo visto che in parte può aiutare a superare alcune di queste problematiche. Ad esempio, grazie alla flessibilità permette di aggiungere o modificare la tipologia di dati in qualsiasi momento, senza poi andare a intaccare il corretto funzionamento del database. Per la sua organizzazione infatti dei documenti, MongoDB non ha legami cosiddetti forti. Penso ad esempio ad uno scavo in corso in cui dobbiamo aggiungere un dato o fare una modifica, insomma, all'ultimo momento. In più la gestione di grandi quantità di dati non risulta un problema, anche perché MongoDB nasce proprio per gestire big data, riuscendo comunque a mantenere performance elevate e tempi di risposta bassi. Questa caratteristica poi è essenziale non in un primo momento per l'inserimento di un singolo scavo, però potrebbe essere effettivamente interessante considerando in un futuro l'utilizzo di questi database per più scavi, mettendoli poi in relazione tra loro, come dicevo prima. Poi ovviamente poco si può fare per la questione dei formati e della denominazione dei documenti, che andrebbero semplicemente, questo parlo a livello generale, gestiti seguendo una buona pratica. Ora nel progetto, all'interno del progetto è stata proposta, però non vuole essere vincolante per altri studi. All'interno di questo lavoro, ad esempio, è stata sviluppata e testata una funzionalità attraverso la quale è possibile importare in maniera massiva dei dati attraverso lo script, nel momento in cui ovviamente però i dati sono organizzati in una determinata maniera, in uno schema, si può dire, ordinato. Questo script non fa altro che prendere i dati, leggerli e mapparli all'interno del database Arca. Per quanto riguarda l'impostazione della banca dati, o meglio il data model design, per Arca è stato semplicemente trasformato il concetto di documento sul cui abbiamo visto si basa MongoDB nell'oggetto nodo. Nel far questo è stata mantenuta quella che possiamo definire l'atomicità del concetto di documento, cioè, mi spiego meglio, tutto quello che riguarda un determinato documento è racchiuso in un unico oggetto JSON, raggruppato poi in collezioni di oggetti singoli. Però questo documento è stato contestualizzato in una rete strutturata, che alla fine diventa la rappresentazione, o meglio, la mappa, possiamo dire la mappa concettuale dell'intero scavo. Il documento quindi è diventato un nodo di un grafo che è percorribile in ogni direzione, come vediamo, sia orizzontale che verticale. Al fine di testare l'applicativo sono stati inseriti i dati di un caso studio. Questi provenivano da un progetto archeologico dell'Università di Padova che aveva previsto una ricognizione iniziale di superficie dove erano stati rinvenuti dei siti o comunque delle aree di scavo che sono state poi indagate e sono stati fatti tutti una serie di studi. Quindi la struttura del database per questo progetto la vediamo a sinistra, quindi unità regionali, unità territoriali, siti e saggi, US e reperti archeologici. Mentre nella parte di destra ci sono delle possibili strutture a seconda del progetto da rappresentare, sono degli esempi. Ecco, vediamo che effettivamente il database è molto flessibile. L'unica accortezza che viene richiesta è quella di mantenere il rapporto 1 a n tra nodi padri e nodi figli. Quindi ad esempio vediamo che l'unità regionale può contenere n nodi unità territoriali, ma l'unità territoriale può discendere solamente da un nodo padre. Ma questo abbiamo visto che ben si può adattare al concetto di archeologico, ecco, di scavo. Alla fine dei 3 anni è stato presentato il prototipo finale del prodotto. Non me ne vogliono gli informatici, so che la denominazione 4.0 non è corretta, però è stato fatto un po', ecco, per comodità. Questo prototipo prevedeva l'accesso libero o autenticato alla banca dati a seconda del tipo di azione che si sarebbe voluta compiere sui dati, quindi una semplice consultazione prevedeva un accesso libero, mentre per la modifica, l'aggiunta, l'eliminazione si richiedeva ovviamente la password, e questo insomma è un aspetto comune a tutti i tipi di database. La strutturazione poi dei dati in schede di dettaglio che sono state definite dinamiche, ossia in comunicazione tra loro grazie ai collegamenti orizzontali e verticali, e poi casomai vediamo più approfonditamente questo concetto. L'inserimento di visualizzatori per ogni tipologia di documento, di documentazione collegata ai dati, quindi PDF, PNG, dati 3D. La possibilità di fare ricerca su campi indicizzati, funzionalità questa modificabile a seconda del progetto che si va a inserire, quindi l'amministratore è responsabile di quali possono essere le voci su cui fare ricerca. E come abbiamo visto prima, l'importazione dei dati massiva o direttamente dall'interfaccia grafica singola. Avrei avuto piacere di mostrare il prodotto, però sapevo che il tempo era poco, quindi ho fatto degli screen dell'applicativo. Apro solo una parentesi, che la grafica è stata lasciata, la parte grafica è stata lasciata abbastanza neutrale, sia per mancanza di tempo, sia proprio per dare la possibilità ai possibili fruitori del prodotto di personalizzarlo un po' a seconda delle proprie esigenze, dei propri gusti. Ecco, questa è la pagina di ingresso di Arca con l'accesso tramite login. Questa è la pagina di lavoro, che abbiamo praticamente la sidebar nella parte sinistra, mentre la work area nella parte destra. La sidebar è un po' quello che possiamo definire un menu, che non è un menu classico, l'abbiamo un po' strutturato ad albero, quindi per richiamare anche un po' il concetto di scavo, quindi praticamente la discendenza dei vari oggetti dai nodi padri, per cui ad esempio l'UR contiene delle UT, che contiene il sito AM, è abbastanza chiaro anche visivamente in questo modo. Quindi questi sono divisione per nodi geografici e nodi dati, che abbiamo noi fatto questa suddivisione perché a noi conveniva per questo caso studio, però in realtà è tutto modificabile. So che ad esempio le US potrebbero essere inserite all'interno dei nodi geografici, noi per comodità le abbiamo messe su nodi dati, però ripeto è molto è personalizzabile, è tutto molto personalizzabile. La ricerca semplificata di cui parlavo prima, quindi ci sono dei campi di ricerca che noi abbiamo selezionato flaggando direttamente dal codice determinate voci, quindi è possibile fare ricerca direttamente per determinate voci, anche queste, ripeto, assolutamente modificabili. Questo è un esempio di scheda dinamica come l'abbiamo definita, quindi questa è una scheda di un US. Vediamo che ci sono dei collegamenti orizzontali, quelli che definivamo prima dei collegamenti orizzontali, che sono altri US praticamente, quindi i collegamenti orizzontali non sono altro che tra nodo figlio e nodo figlio, soprattutto per quanto riguarda le US. Poi ci sono parti testuali, la documentazione collegata e i collegamenti orizzontali e verticali, che non sono altro che tra nodo padre e nodo figlio, quindi in questo caso ad esempio questo US discende da un saggio, che è il saggio 14b. Questo è stato fatto perché in un prototipo precedente non erano state previste queste schede dinamiche. Abbiamo visto che la ricerca era un po' frammentata, quindi si è deciso appunto di inserire questa funzionalità. per avere una navigazione più fluida del prodotto. Scusate. Questi sono i visualizzatori per la documentazione, quindi abbiamo i visualizzatori ad esempio per i 3D di scavo, dei visualizzatori per i PDF, per i documenti PDF, e poi ci sono ovviamente dei visualizzatori per la documentazione statica, come possono essere la documentazione grafica e fotografica. E poi alla fine ho la pagina di inserimenti o di modifica dei dati. Questa qua per le modifiche singole. Ora, alcune considerazioni per quanto riguarda i possibili sviluppi futuri. In primis, senza dubbio, l'applicativo andrebbe collegato a un GIS di scavo, già previsto da Arca, ma non sviluppato. Io non mi sono mai occupata troppo di GIS e quindi avrei necessità di parlare con uno specialista e provare a vedere se è possibile effettivamente fare questa integrazione assolutamente necessaria. Altrettanto importante poi sarebbe poter collegare il sistema con un matrix interattivo e interrogabile. Ora, io ho partecipato al workshop di Emanuele Demetrescu e mi è sembrato perfetto, però anche qui ci sarebbe da lavorarci. E poi tutta una serie di modifiche, insomma, a livello grafico che abbiamo già visto. Concludo perché credo di essere al limite. Allora, come spesso accade, purtroppo la fine di un dottorato coincide con la fine di un progetto, vuoi per mancanza di fondi, di interesse, però per fare in modo che questo lavoro, almeno questo, non sia relegato nei depositi universitari, si è deciso di mettere a disposizione il codice in maniera libera e aperta, in modo tale che possa essere scaricato, usato e modificato da chiunque possa averne un interesse. Quindi per concludere il mio invito è proprio questo. Il prodotto è con licenza GPU 3.0. Io vi ringrazio, spero di essere stata chiara e per qualsiasi dubbio vi invito a contattarmi, sono semplicemente anche solo per fare due chiacchiere. Grazie mille intanto.
Okay, thank you very much, Irene. We have several questions already about your project. The first one by Augusto, that's probably the easiest one to answer.
Sì.
So have you used a real project, real data while developing your software?
Grazie Augusto. Sì, è stato sperimentato con un caso studio dell'Università di Padova, di uno scavo di alpino. Era in previsione l'inserimento di altri due casi studio, un caso studio di uno scavo sardo e di uno scavo di Pantelleria. Purtroppo, e anche questo per motivazioni legate al Covid, non si sono fatti gli scavi e quindi si è bloccato un po' tutto. Spero, cioè la mia speranza è quello che ci siano persone interessate anche solo a testarlo e io posso fare un po' di supporto nell'inserimento dei dati almeno iniziale, perché mi rendo conto che possa essere un po' ostico all'inizio. Sì.
All right, so yeah, the next one is a little bit more difficult to answer maybe, but that is also something I had in mind when listening to your talk. So have you first considered maybe basing your work on something that already exists, and what made you decide to start your own project from scratch? Anyway.
Sì, però niente di così puntuale, cioè erano più prodotti in realtà per un singolo progetto e non riutilizzabili. Quindi la volontà appunto era quello di creare più un contenitore che un prodotto che si andasse che andasse a coprire solamente il bisogno di un caso singolo. Ci sono tanti prodotti sviluppati simili, però creati proprio per un singolo caso, non per essere riutilizzati da altri.
Okay, I'm sure there will be a lot more on Telegram later. Okay. Oh, this is a very fundamental one by Julian, and I think a lot of people are wondering about this at this point. So these NoSQL databases, PouchDB, MongoDB, etc., why are they actually better than classic traditional SQL? Or why do you think it is really something that you should use? Yeah, and what can you do with it that you cannot do with a classic SQL database approach?
Non credo di aver capito bene la domanda, Julian, scusami.
You decided to use NoSQL, MongoDB.
Sì, in realtà era una sperimentazione. Io ho sempre utilizzato database relazionali. Ripeto, non sono contraria ai database relazionali, però per questo progetto abbiamo un po' voluto fare una scommessa e abbiamo provato ad utilizzarne uno non relazionale per vedere quali potessero essere effettivamente i benefici di un non relazionale all'interno della rappresentazione dei dati archeologici.
Okay, there's one more question from Joseph Lewis. He asked if you have plans for where you will use this software next. Are there any other archaeology projects for which you want to use your software in the future?
Sicuramente è incentrato su progetti archeologici, progetti di scavo, però ripeto, potrebbe essere anche una pubblicazione, cioè potrebbe essere anche parallela ad una pubblicazione cartacea, quindi una pubblicazione supplementare ad una cartacea, un po' di supporto, ecco.
Okay, thanks very much, Irene, also for answering all these questions. I'm sure there will be more on Telegram as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. And now we have to move on to our next presenters, Emanuel Demetrescu and Manuel and Bruno. Where's Bruno? Bruno,
hi, good morning
as well. Hello, good morning. And I will just let you start straight away.
Okay, I'm starting sharing my screen, and okay, can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Here we will present the use of 3D tools to improve the transformation of the archaeological record into a virtual reconstruction. Just some word regarding the extended matrix, the formal language under the hood. It is a formal language with which to keep track of virtual reconstruction processes, and it is intended to be used by archaeologists and heritage specialists to document in a robust way their scientific activities. This is the web page of the project, and you can download from here a lot of stuff, or also to learn and to understand better the structure of this formal language. The extended matrix is based on the theory of gap proposed by Nicolaus Tenonius in 16th century. Despite the fact that he is the father of the principle of stratigraphy, the theory of gaps has been taken into account just in geological disciplines, but has been almost completely ignored in the archaeological discipline. Let's take an example of the Trajan Forum. The slabs on the floor are missing, but thanks to the traces left in the cement mortar, we can say a lot regarding position and dimension of the slabs, while at the same time, we are not sure about the material of the slabs. The gap in the structure is a formal starting point for the reconstruction. We can collect this information and use it to reconstruct to the context. The extended matrix approach provides the virtual stratigraphic unit. to fill the gap and restore how likelihood the context looked like in the past. The virtual stratigraphic units are organized in the extended matrix. The matrix of Harris divides the stratigraphy in periods in green, while the extended matrix adds the possibility to fill lost epochs in red. The USV, the virtual stratigraphic unit, together with the regular stratigraphic unit, are enclosed within chronological phases. The reconstruction of a phase lies between the phase to be reconstructed and the next phase. In this example of the use of the extended matrix from the line C underground of Rome, the Ambaradam station, a scientific project directed by Rossella Rea and Simona Morretta with the collaboration of the CNR, the stratigraphic units and the virtual stratigraphic units, for simplicity, are also grouped in virtual actions, such as the construction of a foundation, a columnade, the podium of a temple, and so on and so forth. In a part of the excavation of the Onde Marine at Cerveteri, directed by Rita Cosentino, we made a first experiment in 2016 to connect the stratigraphic documentation with the stratigraphic record inside a 3D environment, Blender 3D, using a mixed technique. Every context or stratigraphic unit is represented by a symbolic mesh, the proxy model. In order to connect the stratigraphic record to the 3D model, a custom add-on for Blender was developed in Python. The add-on, EM-Tools, takes care to import the matrix structure, the name and the description of the stratigraphic units inside Blender, and helps to create the proxy models. The add-on is available on GitHub. A fast way to create 3D proxy models of the excavation is a two-monitor setup or two users in your team. Start with the YED and Blender. The modifications in the matrix on the left reflect in the 3D environment, just saving the opened files, and in real time you get your information in the 3D environment. The workflow can be divided in three parts: data collection on site and digitalization. Data processing, connecting the stratigraphic units with the digital replica, in this case a stratigraphic photogrammetric survey, using the extended matrix tool, and the modeling of the proxies, that are the simplified models useful for an iterative process of validation together with the scientific committee of the project. It is simple to be modified and provides all the information stored in the extended matrix. And after that, you can create the final model, the representation model. So there are three levels of visualization: the reality-based model, a 3D snapshot of the context in 2016, the proxy model with the different levels of certainty, and the representation model, the beautiful one, with color, materials, lighting, and so on and so forth. Let's make an example with the reconstruction of the Roman smithy in Montebelluna. This reconstruction hypothesis has been made by the University of Padova, Professor Maria Stella Busana and Denis Francisci, together with the collaboration of CNR ESPC. And the 3D models has been made by the CNR ESPC, while the data regarding the Roman smithy are property of the Superintendenza Archeologica per l'area metropolitana di Venezia, province di Belluno, Padova e Treviso. The project has been funded by the Montebelluna Municipality and Museo di Storia Naturale e Archeologia di Montebelluna. It's a four-step process. Step one, after the import of the photogrammetric model, if any, and of other graphical documentation, in this case, this document, the document 15 in the extended matrix dataset, it is possible to start to model the proxies representing the stratigraphic units or context and the masonry stratigraphic segments. So it's a matter of digitize on top on the 3D survey in order to segment with these proxies volumes in space that are our stratigraphic units. Is a way to highlight and to make the dimension of the stratigraphic unit using these symbolic meshes, the simplified meshes. In some cases, you can see all the stratigraphic unit inside your survey. In other cases, you can get that because you go too late on the field to take your 3D survey, and part of the stratigraphy has been already excavated. So you have to reconstruct the limits of the stratigraphy using both the photogrammetric survey and the documentation, the drawing documentation. You can use the extended matrix tool for that, putting on the virtual space all the stuff and drawing your 3D volumes. So after the modeling of the proxies representing the USM, it is time to go back in the extended matrix and to start with the reconstruction hypothesis. On the right, you get not only the matrix of Harris, but in this case, it's the matrix of Harris, sorry, with some metadata regarding, some paradata regarding data provenance of the proxies. I said before something about the fact that the floor, for instance, is something that was drawn by the photogrammetric survey and some drawings. Okay, so you have to put these somewhere. This is the final proxy model with just the color of the color scheme of the extended matrix, red for existing stratigraphies. And you can do this task in parallel. An archaeologist can work on the YED system to ingest the reconstruction hypothesis. And another modeler is able in real time to draw the reconstruction, the volumes of the reconstruction hypothesis using the proxy approach. You can connect this information at runtime. And when the model is validated, you can start to create the second model, the visualization model, that can be exported through the export model tool to Aton for an interactive web app, MVIC, that will be explained by Bruno Fanini, or a desktop installation on Unreal, Godot, Unity, and so on and so forth. Just one word regarding the Open Extended Matrix initiative. The idea is to don't use by ourselves the extended matrix, but to create a network of laboratories and professionals and researchers that want to use this tool and improve this tool. So you just send an email, contact us, and we can create an agreement or simply a gentleman agreement to work together on it, because all the code is online and you can use it by yourself. But we can provide, of course, some help to start. You can use it in your project. Your data is your data. But if you need, you can provide free hosting on our server for specific tasks just to start. But you can use it independently. And if you want, you can give visibility to your project in the Extended Matrix Gallery. And sure, you can participate in the Extended Matrix development. The idea is to start to have some workshops, some conferences once per year to have a meet in presence, if we can, and work on the next version of Extended Matrix with a new white paper with the guidelines. Thank you so much. I give the floor to Bruno Fanini.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I will share my screen now. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I'll just briefly talk about the MVIC tool. That is basically this is a tool that was created for professionals to basically to create an interactive tool for professionals to inspect and query extended matrix in a multidimensional space. What we are looking at here is one of the first, the very first prototypes started in 4 years ago. That was very useful to start this research line. It was actually a very good research playground for investigating, for instance, extraction and runtime from the extended matrix into an interactive application. Design, query, and inspection at runtime, and also investigating how to present such connected data, also including, for instance, as you are looking at the video, including immersive VR inspection. So this was yesterday. Today, MVIC is basically a completely online tool. Thanks to, it's basically a web application, also developed under the European project SOC. And as Emmanuel was pointing out, it's based on an open source, completely open source framework called Atom that offers several advantages for this kind of application. That means you can just use your browser without no required installation. And thanks to Atom, you have a cross-device presentation. That means that this tool works on mobile, including smartphone, tablets, up to desktop computers, and up to immersive VR devices. Then you have the possibility to perform very fast multidimensional queries on the visible and proxies. Then we have full compliancy with modern web standards. And then it offers also a very scalable deployment on local or remote contexts. In the afternoon, there is also a dedicated workshop on Atom. I will just show you very briefly a live demo of MVIC. Here is just basically a single URL, and it's running on one of our servers in Rome. So here you can see there is a timeline that automatically extracts from the extended matrix, so it allows you to navigate through time, while you can use common input devices to navigate through space. Okay, so as you can see, I'm querying at runtime all the proxies. And it's also possible to use the search box to, for instance, to search for a specific, like in this case, a specific unit, a specific proxies. Or you can also put here like ground, for instance, and it automatically highlights all the proxies that contains in the description the keyword ground. So it also looks for keywords and search inside the description of the proxies. So this is very useful for you to perform a very live refinement of the search at runtime. So then back into my presentation. As I was saying, we support, the tool supports immersive VR. So we are here looking at footage recorded on Oculus Quest. Once again, there is no installation. It's just a link that you can open, and you can explore this kind you have this kind of experience. So you can perform a very close inspection, in this case of Montebelluna. It's also proved very useful for us to validate an extended matrix, because you basically you have a sort of validation tool. You can perform a visual debug while you are designing your extended matrix. Then we also integrate this kind of workflow with a cloud-based workflow. That means that we can combine this tool with cloud services, and this enables a distributed pipeline between professionals that are physically very distant, that are working remotely on some project. You have also the advantage of the fine-grained access policies, because you can share a specific folder, a specific project with certain people. And then, of course, there is also the possibility to live update the extended matrix, while there is some professional that is working on this is modifying the extended matrix. There is another one that live updates and see live all the changes in this application. The tool is completely open source, GPL version 3. And here's the link where you can download, and there will be soon a README with all the instruction for local and remote deployment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. Very impressive. So while we wait for questions from the audience, I'm really fascinated by how much software you guys have created. So apparently this is all project funded for now, is it? So do you have to look for a model now to sustain this development in the future? Or what are the plans for, let's say, the next 5 or 10 years to keep building the software?
If you are referring to MVIC, it was basically developed under the European project SOC.
Yes.
So that's for MVIC. While we are looking for other projects then to continue the development on other other lines, like for instance a full online editor that is all completely based on the web. Mm-hmm. So you can basically create your extended matrix directly on a web page instead of using other tools.
Very, very fascinating. So the extended matrix, so just that I understand correctly, I've been trying to follow up a little bit on the resources you were providing, Emmanuel. But essentially, I'm wondering the Harris matrix, in its traditional form, is just about physical observations, right? Things that you can actually see in the field, or at least believe that you can see. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, even the aspect of chronology, something is earlier than or later than, is already a step of interpretation. I think that is what Harris also argued, that his matrix does not directly represent chronology; it represents physical relationships, and the later than earlier than thing is already a conclusion that we derive from it. So how do you? So now you're adding many more aspects of preservation and uncertainty. My question would be: are you concerned that maybe this makes interpreting this matrix even one level more difficult because we have one additional level of abstraction, or do your practical results show that this is no problem at all to handle?
Okay, the idea is that when we deal with the reconstruction, it is good, in my experience, to have all the stuff on the desk to work with it. So the more complex record in cultural heritage maybe is the stratigraphic record, because you have a lot of stuff. The matrix of Harris represents the relative chronological links between ancient actions that you are able to see on top of physical evidences. The idea is to try to document the virtual reconstruction exactly as it is in front of your eyes, like it is not an abstraction, but something real, something present in space. So the idea is to use exactly the same tool to describe also the reconstruction hypothesis. This is the idea.
Yeah.
And somehow you have everything under your eyes because it's a bidimensional space that is synoptic and synchronic. Traditionally, is a kind of mental map for the archaeologist, because he's able to write down the relations between the chronological relations between the objects. This is before, first, this is after, and so on and so forth. And the idea to put to fill the gap between the different phases is a possibility that, in our experience, is something that helps because you are starting to create your virtual reconstruction on the field. This is the novelty. You join the reconstruction hypothesis with the moment when you are on the field, not after.
Okay, that's a very good point. Yes, that's a very good point. That's what I was thinking about. I didn't quite, but that's a very strong argument, I think. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you very much, Bruno. We have to move on to the next speaker.
Thank you.
And that will be Timo Hamburg. Unfortunately, he does not have a webcam, but I'm sure we'll enjoy his presentation just as much. Hello, Timo.
Hello, good morning. I hope you can see my screen now. At least I shared it.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But it's
there
coming.
We go.
Oh, yes, the little minions are here. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Perfect. Then first of all, thank you for having us. And in our presentation, I will talk about a little project of ours, which is called Little Minions and Sparkle Unicorns as tools for archaeology. And first, I want to set this presentation into context. So yesterday, there was already a talk by our group, and we call ourselves the Research Squirrel Engineers. Yesterday, there was a talk about Occam stones by Sophie and Florian. I am Timo, and also part of this research group, which has freely formed, and we are interested in open science and linked data projects in various aspects. So in our daily work, what we have come to find as researchers is that we often make some small self-made scripts, homegrown small applications, which significantly help us to get this work done. And we call those little helpers little minions, which often reduce our workload and optimize the workflows that we have in research. And at the CAA conference, Computer Applications and Quantitative Methods in Archaeology, a working group was created on Little Minions, focusing on development and customization of lost software for archaeology. That's where the term Little Minions actually comes from. And what we see in linked data that is that there are a lot of repositories that you might use for archaeological purposes, for example, by Wikidata or DBpedia or several others, as we will show in the presentation further. And the problem is mainly if you are an archaeologist or you are in the digital humanities area that you really would like to use this data, but the access to the linked open data is not so user-friendly, easy to use, even though it is openly available. So basically you might need to learn the query language to get access to linked open data, and this is a huge hurdle that we would like to ease by developing appropriate tools to make it easier. And one of those tools, the Sparkle Unicorn, is what we want to present today. What is linked data? To start with, for people who do not know, well, linked data is a format consisting of so-called triples, and a triple consists of subject, predicate, and object, meaning you have a subject relation, which could be an object, a predicate, which is something, maybe an attribute of this subject, and which is connected to an object. So for example, we might have a city, and this city could be the subject, and then we might have a predicate, which might be a number of inhabitants, and the object might be the actual number of inhabitants, or it might even be another city. Maybe a city is next to another city, which is then in itself a subject of other triples. You can use the Sparkle query language to query linked data, and basically what Sparkle does is get you the appropriate triples out of a huge graph, which we call the web of data, or the linked open data cloud. The linked data principles are as follows. Every instance that is represented in linked data should get a URI, which is accessible via HTTP and also becomes a resource on the web that we might query or even view in a web browser if appropriate technology is there. It is machine readable, and you can link more data to existing data, which is always interesting to discover more use case related data content. And over the years, a huge linked open data cloud has emerged, and a subset of this linked open data cloud, for example, the cloud for geography, is also interesting for archaeology, but as we have said, is not always considered because it's not so easily accessible. So if we conclude this, the internet gives researchers the possibility of sharing their research data and enables the community to participate in the semantic discourse to create previously unknown knowledge, but much of these shared data are not findable, accessible, and they result in what we call unknown data dragons. And there's also there's also a special interest group for that. So this is the CAA, a special interest group on semantics and cloud in archaeology, where we actually want to find data repositories and make them better accessible for the archaeology and other communities. So we would like to further establish linked data in archaeology, enable beginners to use and produce linked data in order to have an impact for the community and okay. And there are many aims and perspectives in this special interest group, which you might also engage in after hearing this talk. Now for the linked data tools that we would like to develop. So there are many linked data tools already around. So there's Pelagios network, where you can use tools like Recogito to annotate certain texts. And Annotorious is a tool to annotate images where you can get linked data. And those are exactly the kinds of tools that we would like to develop, which make it easier actually to produce linked data. Now, what is the Sparkle Unicorn we are talking about in this talk? So this is an idea which was created on the CAA conference 2019 in Krakow, out of the need to find a term for such tools that enable an easy access to Sparkle endpoints and linked data. And the idea behind it is as follows. So on the right, you can see what a pretty complex Sparkle query might look like. And for people not so familiar with tech, they will see, wow, most of the tools require a knowledge of Sparkle. Queries can become very complex. I might not be able to consider this linked data paradigm in my work. So the question arises, how can I help researchers without knowledge of the Sparkle query language in using community-driven data from the semantic web for their work and thereby have a profit? So this is where we come in with the Sparkle Unicorn QGIS plugin. So we developed a tool that will mitigate the aforementioned aspects in a way that we develop a FLOSS GIS tool for LOD and archaeology. And we address one of those problems, mainly the GIS problem. How can I access linked data in QGIS by developing this Sparkle Unicorn QGIS plugin? You can find it on GitHub, the source code. The plugin is installable in QGIS. However, for now, you need to check the experimental flag in QGIS in the plugin menu in order to find our plugin. And what it provides you is a linked data access point for QGIS. So what you can do is, if you know Sparkle queries, then you might send a Sparkle query to a Sparkle endpoint, and it will return a QGIS vector layer, as we will see in the next slides. So this is a direct access point for the QGIS community to use linked data and to further process it in the QGIS application. What we offer are 3 functions. So the first is, of course, querying semantic web data resources. The second one is enriching QGIS vector layers with data already accessible in the semantic web. And the third is the transformation of QGIS vector layers to RDF data. This is the use case when you want to take, for example, a GeoJSON file, convert it to linked data, and publish it on the web. And for each of these 3 functions, we will now show some examples and show you some insights on how we solve those issues inside the plugin. But first, some example data. So in order to use archaeologically related data, we chose 2 data sets. One is a trade route network in Great Britain, and one is the Upper Germanic Limes, just to illustrate the functions that I present along in the presentation. So this is the Limes in Germany, and the dataset looks like this. So you have a Limes town description and an object, and you have an ID, and you have a category, and the categories are mainly small forts along the Limes line, and we will see what we could possibly extend from there using linked data. Function A, as I said, is querying spatial data from Sparkle endpoints, and you could get spatial data from various pre-configured Sparkle endpoints. That includes Nomisma, Kerameikos, Pleiades, and the Roman Open Data. And it might look like this. So this is Nomisma, and you can query for mints. You do not have to enter this Sparkle query as is seen here, but rather you can select a pre-configured Sparkle endpoint, like Nomisma, and then you get a list of concepts which you might choose to query, and the query will be pre-generated for you. So this query that you are seeing here does not need to be written. It is already pre-configured for you. If you have further knowledge in the Sparkle query language, you can, of course, modify the query. But you may also execute this query as is and get a result like this. And as you can see, a QGIS vector layer is created here. Another example are ports of the Roman period. This is now queried from the Pleiades Sparkle endpoint that we have set up, which is also pre-configured in the plugin. So you can install the plugin and use those examples right away. And another example, Roman Open Data places. So here we see a lot of places from the Roman Open Data Sparkle endpoint. So what might be a use case for you? So you could query the Wikidata triple store for prehistoric art sites, or our own research scribble triple store for military camps of the Limes. So this is the data set that we have actually shown before. And Wikidata is also accessible in our menu, so you can query Wikidata case with prehistoric art, or also query our Limes example by querying military camps in our Sparkle endpoint, which is also pre-configured in the plugin if you install it. Now to function B. Function B is the data enrichment. So function B allows the enrichment of a given geodata set using semantic web resources from the linked open data cloud with a focus on Wikidata. And what we show in the next example is that we enrich the elevation levels of towns along the Roman limes to a data set, the limes data set that we have previously introduced. So how does it work? We see here that this is the table of the data set that I have shown before. And what we need to do if we want to enrich data is to first find an equivalent in Wikidata. So here we have names of towns. So what we need to do is we need to search Wikidata for an appropriate concept which might represent those names of towns, which is in that case municipality of Germany, because this limes section is in Germany. We search the concept in Wikidata, which we can do using the search dialog. Once we have chosen the concept, which is in this dialog, we can search for properties that are associated with this concept. So for municipality of Germany, we have those concepts. It's actually a big list. Then we can choose which item to enrich. For example, here, elevation above sea level, if that is interesting for us. And then we get a new column in the dataset table, which says, okay, we want to enrich elevation above sea level. We might name it in a different way. And everything else is basically pre-configured with triple store and whatever else there needs to be. Then we can start the data enrichment. And what we will see is that a new column has appeared in our QGIS dataset, which includes now the elevation above sea level. But as we can see, it does not include it everywhere, because you have to keep in mind that linked data is, of course, not complete. So there might be some annotations for elevation above sea level for some towns, and there might be no annotation for other towns. So if there is no annotation, then of course nothing will be enriched to the dataset. And this might be useful for you if you want to consider particular attributes more in your archaeological work that you might find in linked data resources. Now to function C. Function C is the conversion of geospatial information, for example, from GeoJSON into RDF, so that the information might be represented for the purpose of publishing archaeological geodata as linked data. This is probably a more specific task where you have to know some linked data knowledge, but the idea is as follows. We still have this dataset table that you have seen from QGIS, and now we need to map every column of the dataset table to an appropriate URI in the semantic web, which we can configure in this dialog. If you are familiar with the semantic web, then you might know that you can map items to so-called data properties, which have a primitive type, integer or a string, or you might map it to possibly other data types. So maybe it's a categorical column where the types of forts are defined as strings. Then you might map it as a subclass of the whole table that you might also append with a class here, and you can configure this one per column, and you can select a class for the whole data set, and also configure a target namespace so that the data set can be integrated into the semantic web. This mapping, as you can configure here, can be saved as a mapping file format, which you can then reuse or maybe share to other colleagues who have the same problem facing the same data set to uplift it into a semantic representation. And then the conversion is as follows. So every row of the table will be converted to a representation, including the geometry and every attribute as configured in the configuration dialog, as we've seen before. And then finally, you can upload it into your favorite Drupal store where you store your linked data, and then you can view it with a linked data viewer such as this one. This is basically what we wanted to convey in the presentation. We have shown you one example for a Sparkle Unicorn tool. We would appreciate any feedback and any hints on how we can make those tools better accessible for the archaeological geo community, and would appreciate any help that you might give us in any form. That's all from our talk. We thank you for our attention. You can see the links here for the Sparkle Unicorn plugin, the GitHub, and our presentation is also shared on Zenodo if you want to read what we have presented. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Timo. So while we wait for questions from the audience, I have just been looking a little bit at the comments and the discussion on Telegram, and it's interesting. There's a lot of discussion going on about classic SQL versus no SQL. And I think it's probably there should be an equally intense discussion about why we actually need linked open data and what its real strengths and advantages are compared to classic standardized geodata in a relational database schema. So Timo, what would you say? What is the real strengths of this linked open data approach? What new perspectives can it offer that the traditional data schemas cannot offer?
So if you want to do data integration in the traditional way, what you might have is maybe a Postgres database. You have a variety of data sets that you might need to download. You need to integrate them into your dataset schema. Or maybe you even need to create this dataset schema, which might be very cumbersome to do. And it needs to be done for every project that you might approach. If you use linked open data, you might refer to already existing schemas and concepts that are defined in certain semantic web repositories. You can, as we have seen in this plugin, you can easily enrich other data. You may even state certain federated queries, which means I can write a Sparkle query, which queries my own data that I've stored in my own Sparkle endpoint, Drupal store, and include data from other linked data repositories in the same query. So this gives you a more flexible approach of handling data from different sources that you might not even want to care for. So maybe I am an expert in some archaeological area and care for this data, but I want to enrich data I am not an expert in. And using a linked data repository from other experts that actually curate the data, and being able to do so on the fly, this is, I think, a major advantage of linked data as compared to the SQL world.
Okay. We have a question here from Joe Lewis. What is required if you want to set up your own connections to data stores? Not included in your plugin already, I suppose that means.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if you want to connect to Pleiades, how do you do that?
So Pleiades is actually included already, but basically there are two approaches. So in our GitHub, if you are familiar with JSON, we have elaborated on how to extend a JSON file which is in the plugin directory. This is the techie approach, and there's also a configuration dialog in the Sparkle Unicorn plugin where you can add your own Sparkle endpoint with some configurations in the window, and you can Sparkle this Sparkle endpoint right away. So that's how you can do it. If you want your Sparkle endpoint to be added permanently to the Sparkle Unicorn plugin release, then you might contact us and we might add it to the official file.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Timo. I'm sure the discussion will go on Telegram. For all your other questions and feedback. Before we conclude today's session, I would like to remind you that we are only going into a lunch break now until 2:15, and then there will be another roundtable on ArcheoFOSS and insight into the future. So be sure to be there. And those of you who have registered for a workshop, there will be 3 workshops today in the afternoon. If you have registered for one of them, the workshops start at 4 in the afternoon. Okay. Thank you. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to the audience for being here today. It's been my pleasure, and see you later.